Afternoon, everybody. It's hard to believe that our dear friend Rohini is not with us. A renowned particle physicist and a gender champion. Words not enough to capture her personality. Always there with a bright smile. And any interaction, discussion with her, very intense. I vividly remember one of my early memories of her in TIFR in West Canteen in my student days. She was standing by the table where all many senior theoreticians were sitting and arguing about something. I can still hear her voice and laughter clearly resonating through canteen. She epitomized Marathi saying, Murti Lahanpan Kirti Mahan. One did not have to ask what she worked on. She was an example of high energy. An excellent orator, teacher. She's been a role model for many of my generation and younger ones. Later, when I joined as a faculty, I got to work with her and got to know her very well. She was member or chair of several academic evaluation committees, review committees, very precise, proactive, and with her one always learned something new. She brought me into women in science. She simply told me, you have to do it. I was a member of a DST Women in Science committee with her, which she chaired. Her firm but compassionate handling of women scientists and absolute no-nonsense attitude towards bureaucrats was a great learning exercise. I'm sure we all have many memories relating to various facets of her personality. Growing up in a middle-class family in Pune, she carved a path for herself, establishing as one of the prominent leaders in physics and a force in women in science to reckon with. She ably handled all challenges life threw at her, and it did throw many, living the life on her own terms. It would be apt to say she quit the life also on her terms. Particle physics and gender-related work are like two sides of coin for her. She played a pioneering role in setting up the IPA gender group. We'll now hear, in her own words, a glimpse of journey of women in science in India. We'll play a short clip from her speech during inauguration of GIPWG 2023, which was organized in India.
As I said, it gives me no amount of pleasure to speak with the fact that the International Conference on Women in Physics is really being held in India. And what will my talk contain? I will give you some highlights of the status report on women in physics in India, but really not all the details. And more importantly, I will perhaps focus a little bit on the tale of the journey of this effort in India, which started from the first GIPWG held by IUPAC in 2002 to GIPWG 2023, which is now being held. And I think my talk would be to some extent a proof of the statements that were being made by Lena earlier in her talk, that GIPWG 2023 has been instrumental in fact, spreading the word of gender equity. And in my opinion, the activities in India, at least at the academics levels, really owe a lot to this first GIPWG held in Paris. Where have I taken the information from? So that's the Gender in Physics Working Group webpage that already Vandana told you about. And the two specific documents, which you can go to for many more details, is the issue of Physics News of 2021, in which there is an article by Sumati Rao on history of the working group of women in physics in India, and as well as the article by Bindu Bamba on women in high energy physics in post-independent India. What is my own personal association with the story? I think I have been lucky to have had a ringside view. I have been the part of the Indian team for the first international conference on women in physics, which was held in Paris, and I was a speaker as quote-unquote Asian success story. I was also part of the Indian delegation to the general body of IUPAC in Berlin the year after, where the recommendations that arose from 2002 meeting were adopted as specific recommendations, and they were actually specific recommendations to all the stakeholders, including science academies. I was involved with the national teams for GIPWG in Brazil as well as in Korea. I have been involved in bringing out the first report on access of Indian women to a career in science by the Indian National Science Academy, and I have been the founder chair of the panel for women in science of the Indian Academy of Sciences. And currently, I am a member of the steering group of the Inter-Academy Panel for Women. So the starting point, as I said, is this first international conference on women in physics. And here is our Indian contingent. Here was our fearless leader, Sumati Rao. She has been the country leader for the first few years. This is Nilima Gupte. This is Jyoti Gyanchandani. This is a postdoc at that time, Sunita Nair, who is, of course, now a faculty. And from here, the journey has been to a very significant milestone, which was already mentioned, the first gender conference in physics, Pressing for Progress, which was organized by Prajwal Shastri, who is the country leader of the Women in Physics Working Group in India, as well as the vice chair of the Working Group 5, and Professor Bindu Bamba, who is a theoretical physicist and who was a professor at University of Hyderabad. So today, now we are holding GIPWG 2023. As I said already, Prajwal Shastri, the vice chair of WG5, Pratibha Jolly, of principal of Miranda House, has been the chair of the Commission of IUPAP on Physics Education. I have been a member of Commission C11 for a few 2 terms. Shruvavati Goswami is currently a member of C11. Shobhana Narasimhan is a member of C5, and Urvashi Sinha is a member of C15. I want to sketch some of the steps on the way from here to here. And I think it's the case of you have come a long way, baby, as they used to say in the Virginia Slim's ad in the 70s in the US. But frankly, it's also the case, with apology to Robert Frost, miles to go before we sleep. So,
she was involved in various policy-making committees and always highlighted the need for institutional changes. On July 17 this year, she spoke during inauguration of International Conference on Women in Quantum Science and Technology, organized by SN Bose Center, Kolkata. Sadly, this turned out to be her last public speech. We'll now hear a part of this speech where she elaborates on what needs to be done.
Say, in fact, that number of women in science in India is not small, but number of women doing science in India is rather small. We are actually below the world average, which was given by UNESCO, which is about 30%. So in India, at least in this elite women in STEM area, of course, development of human resources, which are in science, is always a problem of all the countries. But in India, it is the human resource deployment for women that's an issue. So let's try to understand, what are the reasons. And there are some obvious reasons, there are what I call ticking clocks. I call ticking body clocks and ticking science clocks. Because science is very specific. You really develop as a scientist in your postdoctoral period, which is where you say, this is me. In this area, if you want to ask a question, you should ask me. This is precisely the time when the body clock is also ticking away. And that is something none of us can do anything about. So the simultaneously ticking clocks of science and body are actually one of the obvious challenge. And I am general feeling has been that if you take care of these challenges, then life should be okay, because obviously there is no genetic difference between men and women in doing science. While that may be true, there is a whole lot of different dimension and of challenges that women see. And this have been already alluded to, but I want to mention a bit about this. So the general feeling, and those problems are in fact about biases, what women can do and cannot do, biases about women, what women should do and should not do. And more importantly, this is something that we as scientists have to realize, that the kind of mentoring we give to our younger people actually gets affected by these biases. Actually get affected, that they actually affect the way we treat young women scientists. And indeed, in the world of science, the period when you are finished your PhD and setting up in a science career is the most crucial one. And I feel that the way even we scientists treat our young women scientists get affected by these biases. And this is what we call, I would like to call, and it's now word over accepted, invisible biases. So actually, I think, how have we done? In India, we have done pretty well when it comes to try to help women to, how should I say this, to tackle the obvious challenges of family, obvious challenges of taking care of different responsibilities, no matter what various cultural beliefs and practices end up giving women more share of their caring responsibilities and what have you. But I think India, we have been fortunate that things like Department of Science and Technology and many other departments, Department of Biotechnology, have actually implemented a lot of processes which in fact do try to handle this. And I'm very glad that that has happening. But we think that this is enough. If we think this is enough, that's not at all the case. And to me, now the time has come where we have to actively look at what roles institutions what can play. It's one thing to increase funding, it's one thing to introduce special schemes, but it's another thing to try and make everybody realize, make people internalize the fact that these invisible biases is something that we must need to fight. And so in my case, my feeling is that in India, it's been a case of, there used to be a very old advertisement in 1974 of Virginia Slims. And it used to say, "You have come a long way, baby." And I think because women were at that time were not considered to be, they're not considered very nice to be seen smoking. So therefore, there used to be this ad, "You have come a long way, baby. You can now smoke in public. We have special cigarettes for you." And I think, it's a case of you have come a long way, baby, but it's also a case that we have miles to go before we can rest. And I am very, very glad that the kind of efforts that Tanushri Dasgupta has done in organizing this conference, and as Umesh also pointed out about the conference that is being organized by Priya Mahadevan, and these are all, important steps, and this is becoming a norm is really very nice. And I personally look forward to a day when women are not, we don't talk of women scientists and women engineers, but we just talk of scientists and engineers who happen to be women. And again, as Dr. Manna said, in Kolkata, it's difficult not to quote Tagore. Unfortunately, I may not be able to quote it correctly, certainly not in Bengali, but I would like to say, paraphrasing, "In that heaven, dear Lord, let my country arise." Thank you very much.
Many of us who are here and on via YouTube will like to share some memories, and already some have informed me, so we will now call one by one. I will try best to accommodate everybody. There is also a bulletin board which is set up for leaving messages. The link is available in the chat. I think Nilima is not there because she had some power issue, she said. Is Chanda here? Yeah. Can I unmute you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So you want me to go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you, Nilima, and all of you to have organized this meeting. And for all of us, Rohini was a really dear friend. And only after 2 days now, slowly the bad news is sinking in that yes, she is really not with us. And we knew for several months now that she has been very ill, but you keep hoping that she would bounce back with her usual resilience and the fighting spirit that she had. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I want to, give more of a personal reminiscence because I have known Rohini actually from the time, way back from 1976 when I first joined Stony Brook as a PhD student. And I still remember I had come from India with my bag and baggage, and Rohini was there at the Stony Brook Railroad Station to receive me as one of the volunteers to, receive the new students. So we go back almost 48 years now. And so there is a lot of common shared past, and especially after she shifted to IIC in 95, and then especially in the last 12 years when our departments merged in the same building, I really got a chance to interact with her and know her very well. So, um, as you know, Rohini was a really very remarkable and vibrant personality, and just being around made you feel so alive, and it was always inspiring. Even if she dropped by my office for 2 minutes to talk, I felt okay, these things are not so bad. And I could see that she was always driven by excellence in science, her own as well as in others. And she would enjoy a talk given by somebody, and she would come and tell me, this was so exciting. Why was it exciting? And so, of course, her contributions to science and women in science are enormous. And everybody will probably talk about it, so I won't touch that subject much. But I should just mention that her path was not always very straightforward, and she had to really struggle through many things. And again, many people will probably talk about it. Nilima said she will mention this. So I won't say much about it, but it was a struggle and she persevered, and she came out with a resounding success. So that really is the, to her spirit that she was all this. And I just wanted to mention some of what I think are her most striking qualities, both as a person and as a scientist. First was, of course, that she had remarkable intelligence. But also more important, I think, her capacity to get to the really core of any problem that was being discussed. So I had the, good fortune to listen to be in the audience or giving the talk where she was in the audience. And she would always ask the most pertinent question. This was really amazing because even if she was not an expert in the field, Rohini always got the gist of what was happening, and she would ask questions which were, always enlightening. You learned more about the subject because of those. And I think that was also because she had very broad ranging curiosity, and she took the interest and, effort to understand somebody, which is not very common. And she was also extremely sincere in anything she took up. So, for example, she was on so many committees, and sometimes I used to, tell her, Rohini, I mean, why are you spending so much time? But she would actually, put in effort, unlike a lot of people who just go and sit on the committees. She would do the homework. She would ask people in the field, what do you think about this candidate or that, their work? And so I think she really wanted to give back to the society, and which not many people appreciate how much work she put in for all the committees she was on. And I think we all as a community really are benefited by that. And yeah, I mean, I think more than anything else was her warm personality and her generous nature, which came through in all her interactions. And she mentored so many students and colleagues. And I don't know, this is my third condolence meeting that I'm attending. First was in our department the same day she passed away. Yesterday was at the Indian Academy of Sciences, and this one. And you could just see how many people she has touched so positively, all the way from starting students to senior people. And, that's really remarkable what one person can do in one life. So that, I always thought of Rohini first as a friend and then as a scientist, but you realize that what impact she has made for the community, that came through all these meetings. And also, I want to again stress that Rohini had a genuine and broad-ranging interest in science because our fields are very different. I work on galactic dynamics, which is very different. But I would often discuss what I was doing or my students were doing, and she would be very interested, and then see sort of right away why it was so exciting and point out, what other things could be tried, which I always appreciated. And in fact, in the last few years, she has been interested in dark matter, and dark matter plays a very important role in galactic dynamics. So she took more interest in my work and my students, and then often she would point out, look, this is an interesting paper. Why don't you people look at it? And so that's one example of her sort of broad ranging interest. And one small anecdote I want to mention is just last month, I think September 19th, I organized a talk by a student visiting from France who was going to talk about something called MOND, which is a modified Newtonian dynamics. That's another way of looking at things not using dark matter. So I mentioned to Rohini that, this may be interesting to you, because she was very keen on that subject. And she said, oh, yes. And so we put it on Zoom that day. And, she was so ill that day, but I mean, even then she enjoyed it. She told me later that she enjoyed the talk. And that to me sort of brings out how science drove her, and she was sort of, she could identify herself really with science in very different branches also. One thing I feel really sad about is that yes, Rohini achieved a lot, much more than what many people do in one life. But she still had so many ideas and plans for future work, and she was bubbling with them, that it's a real pity and tragedy that she is not around now to complete those now. And I will not make it too long. Personally, I want to say that she has always been very supportive to me, especially about 10 years ago. I went through a really rough patch when I lost my father and my husband within a very short span of about 6 months. And it was really a tough time for me. And Rohini was one of the people, and some of my other colleagues also, who really stood by me, and I will always appreciate that. That was very special. And coming to more cheerful matters, I'll miss Rohini for the small things we shared, like tea sessions at her home. She was a very warm and hospitable person. So often she would say, Sal, we'll go to our house, and then she would give tea and would chit chat, and she was very warm and hospitable. So that I will miss. And I also wanted to mention, not many people would know that she had developed sort of really very painstakingly built a terrace garden in front of her house. And she was somebody with a green thumb. So she had all kinds of plants, even exotic ones like pineapple and so on. And she used to really enjoy showing me each time I would go there. So I think that sort of was her joy and pride. So I'll miss Rohini, her warm friendship, and I was really fortunate to have known her all these years.
So Chanda has already said, Chanda and I had a long discussion about what aspects of Rohini, about many aspects of Rohini over the last many days. So Chanda has already said many of the things. What I would like to say, there have also been 2 memorial meetings already, or more perhaps. And so many people have probably talked of many aspects. So what I would like to do is to say a few things about things which perhaps have not been mentioned. To the best of my knowledge, have not been mentioned. So one of the things which have not been emphasized enough, and I'm the wrong person to do this, is that what are the technical aspects of her work? There are many particle physicists here, and they will be able to speak about this much better than I do. But I would just like to remind them of what Rohini's contributions were. So Rohini's work is in weak phenomenology, and one of the most important things that she did was with manual Reese, and this was work on two jet processes at the LHC, and the kind of particles which came out of it, and what is the way in which information could be inferred about the gluon content of photons. And there is a number of related papers over here, and this is an important aspect. I hope some of the particle physicists will say more about it. Chanda has already talked about her recent interests, namely that her recent interests were also in dark matter, and the so therefore she was interested in all the work which is coming out of astronomy and astrophysics on dark matter, and she had important things, and she had a whole lot of ideas which could be worked into it, as Chanda has already told you. There's another important thing which Rohini was seriously interested in. And the other important thing which Rohini was seriously interested in is essentially the sum total of her interests in in her last few years is in going beyond the standard model and all the work at the colliders, which in fact could perhaps provide potential signatures of which take you beyond the standard model of particle physics, namely the Weinberg-Salam model. And she was particularly interested in the supersymmetric aspects. Unfortunately, so far, no signatures of supersymmetry have been found, and it would have been really exciting if Rohini had been around, when I'm sure they will be eventually be found. But she has left enough of a legacy behind and enough of students behind who would be able to work on these aspects. There's an important thing which I remembered just as we were about to start on this meeting, and that important thing is there's been recently a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, what is their contribution to physics, etc., etc. So then let me tell you something which many people may not know. Rohini was one of the earliest people to work on symbolic manipulation languages and their application to particle physics phenomenology. So people will have heard of Mathematica, people will have heard of Maxima, but there were languages even before that, and she was one of the earliest people, one of the earliest experts on this. And that was way back in the 1970s, the end of the 1970s. So really that makes her one of the pioneers of AI in particle physics, if you like. So that's as much as I wanted to say about her work. I wanted to say about something about her contributions to the Women in Physics group, especially her contribution, her participation in the Equip. But since you put on a video with her on the Equip, she's already told you about how we went for this for the first Equip conference in Paris, and she, me, Sumati, Jyoti, and I think this lady from RRI, and we had a very uh, interesting time in Paris, and that conference was an eye opener for us. Okay, and that conference was an eye opener for us simply because we had all had a lot of difficulties, okay, of different kinds in different ways, and many of us had never really thought that the difficulties were which we were having were related to sexism. Okay, so you might say, how could you not even think of it? But those were different days, and despite the fact that we had proto-feminist ideas, I should say, we had really not thought seriously of this aspect. And so this came as a very important eye opener for us. And after we came back, all of us worked hard towards this. And Rohini, in fact, was a champion of these causes, and she opened up these issues in many, many, many fora. And many of the much of the she's responsible for bringing about many changes in the way in which people are sciences deals with women in India, and also perhaps internationally. And also she opened up many concrete avenues and seeded many concrete initiatives which took the whole movement forward. So that's as far as what I wanted to say about her contribution to gender issues. I wanted to mention something about her personal life, what Chanda said. She has been very, very warm to her friends personally, those of us who knew her from those days. And in the IPA context, she was a very good friend of my husband, Professor Rahul Basu, and mine. And in the IPA context, there's a IPA award for the best thesis in particle physics, and Rohini was completely instrumental in helping me setting this up with IPA. In fact, she was the person who coordinated this with IPA, and this award, and had it not been for her, I would never have been able to set up this award, set up this committee, and for the also for the professional way in which the whole award has been handled since its inception in 2012. So that's the third thing I wanted to mention. There's an aspect of her personal life which I want to mention, which people don't normally want to bring up and or like to bring up. And I would like to mention here uh, something which is personal, but people's lives are their lives, and there are people who have contributions to our lives at different points in time, whose contributions may not continue till further in life. And in this respect, I would like to mention Rohini's husband, uh, Marek Novikowski. And I would like to, and unfortunately, their marriage did not last, as people would know. But their first few years of marriage were extremely happy. And I knew Rohini in those days. And I think those happy years contributed to some of the strengths that she had. There's an important message which I would like to convey from her to all of you. Rohini was a person who had many, many difficulties in her life. Her professional life was difficult. It When we all came back to India, people were simply not even used to having women postdocs, let alone uh, going from there to women professors and senior scientists was a very, very, very long way. And Rohini encountered difficulties at every stage of her career. However, she could have, especially her years in Bombay University when she was not in TIFR, were very hard. The kind of physical effort that she had to put in just to keep her research going, just to keep her contacts in science, uh, just to do her day-to-day work, come all the way to TIFR, continue to collaborate with collaborators in TIFR. I mean, just the physical effort was amazing. And I would like to tell this to many people who have difficulties, that when you have difficulties, just remember her. She would be an inspiration to anyone who's having difficulties in maintaining their career in the face of day to day problems. And since she has been an inspiration to all of us, I think we should look to her for ways in which we can also all continue our day to day work, even if difficulties come up in our day to day progress. Now, as far as personal things are concerned, she was a very dear friend, she was a very close friend, and she has helped us out in so many different ways. In many ways, simply by talking, but there were concrete ways in which she helped out, which did not, which involved much more than actually talking. That, for example, when Rahul used to travel, since they were in the same areas, they used to always go to many common conferences, especially they visited CERN, etc., many times together. And after he was diagnosed for a serious heart ailment, I used to really worry, how will I let him go to such a distant place? And I would remember, well, Rohini will be there and I can trust her to take care of anything that comes up and hold the fort until I can make it there, if at all, if it is required. And there was that kind of faith was something which you could only have in a person as warm-hearted and helpful as her, and it was more than fully justified. So I'm truly grateful. She has helped me out at times when I've been sick. There have been times when we've had our quota of personal difficulties. But let me go to more personal things. Rohini and I used to spend our time, we used to chat a lot. And because we used to chat a lot, especially when we went abroad, we got into a whole lot of scrapes together. And I'll leave those for another times. They are all quite funny stories. And I would like to end with what Rohini did in terms of outreach activities, especially in terms of outreach to students. And especially to IIT Madras, where I work, she came very often. She last came to IIT Madras last December, and she interacted. She came at the students' invitation, not ours. Our invitations were earlier, but the students wanted her to come and interact in what they call the fireside chats, which take place in this science festival, which we call Shastra. And she came and she gave a brilliant talk. And then just yesterday, students came up to me and they said, it was, ma'am, is has Professor, we heard about Professor Godbole, it was a shock to us. So she was such an inspiration in that fireside chat that she really made us all feel enthusiastic and also guided us as to what was the way to go. And I mentioned this particular case because the students came to me just yesterday, or in fact on Saturday. Yeah, they came to me just yesterday. So this really brought this to mind. And they were not the only ones. I'm talking of IIT Madras students because I was there. But she talked to students everywhere. I mean, she made it a point to reach out to students, to postdocs, to younger faculty, every place that she went to. Okay. And this is one of the reasons why there has been such widespread mourning on her demise. One last point, and I'll close. And I'm thankful to Vandana for giving me this opportunity, which is that those of us who are theoretical physicists, or rather, many of us who are theoretical physicists, are not very outgoing people. We are not people's people, as we might say. We tend to shut our office doors and work. Okay. Rohini was not like that. She, of course, she spent her time working as anybody in theoretical physics has to. But wherever she went, she talked to people, she interacted with them, she found out what they had to say, she told them whatever she needed to tell them. And now I see what an important role this has played in developing the community and the community feeling which all of us have over here. And I would like, on behalf of all of us, to thank Rohini for being such an important role model. There's no question that she has been a very important role model to, to most people in science in India. I should say she has been my role model too, although I have not been able to emulate most of the things that she does. But we had hoped during her illness. During her illness, Chanda and I used to talk almost every second or third day because we were worried about her. And one thing which we always said was that she has such indomitable spirit, she will surmount this also. Unfortunately, it was not to be, but let's take her indomitable spirit as an example and go forward in all our endeavors. Thank you so much.
My sincere apologies to all of you, but I request that please, we have lots of memories and a lot of things to share, but I request people to be a bit brief so that I think since there are many people who want to share. And I request Rukmanji.
Can I mute now, Vandana?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Rukmanji.
Yes, thank you, Vandana. The last 2 days have been difficult. And today, listening to Rohini in her own voice was heart-wrenching. As they say, we'll all ultimately become stories in someone's lives. But it was difficult to accept that Rohini has become a story already. Rohini and I were close, not like Nilima or others, but she was slightly older than me, not much, 5 or 6, not even 6, 5+ years older. And we had overlaps. Whenever I requested her to join an event for a cause, she obliged. You can well imagine how busy it got for someone like Rohini around Women's Day. Last year, I was asked to chair a panel at the Raman Research Institute. I've been in the governing council of RRI and involved in many of their programs. So on 8th of March last year, I was chairing this panel and I wanted Rohini to speak. And she readily agreed. And her presentations were so thought-provoking. They're full of data, so much of rigor. And I think you can see that that was truly a physicist way of speaking. Last year, we met at quite a few events. And her new quest was to unpack gender biases in competitive exams. First time I heard, I've been thinking about it for a few years myself. And we had an event at Shiv Nara University in June last year. Rohini could not come physically, but she was present online throughout controlling and moderating the discussion. And then again, there was one on the same theme at IIT Delhi in October, where she came physically. This year had been a bit difficult for her. We missed her physical presence at the SN Bose National Center in July. And I somehow had a bad feeling. I mean, last few days I've been thinking about her a lot. We talked about some things, but I'll just tell you how it went for me. Because she always obliged whenever I asked her to do something, I tried to reciprocate. But I missed a couple of invitations. The most remarkable one, probably all of you have noticed, was my contribution to Lilavati's daughters. I'm not there in that book. I think it was 2007 or something, 2008, 2007, I think. I was crazily busy at JNU. At JNU, outside the School of Physical Sciences, I had to share many responsibilities. One important role was as the chairperson of the new Gender Sensitization Committee Against Sexual Harassment, GS-CASH in short. Now, the story everybody sort of knows, but after some serious groundwork at JNU, GS-CASH was set up in April 1999. But for it to be operational and effective, its rules and procedures were to be drafted and approved by the university's executive council. I became a member in GS-CASH in 2001, and in a few months, I was elected the chairperson when the incumbent chairperson fell seriously ill. I had to learn on the job, negotiated with all stakeholders without compromise, edited and placed the complete rules and procedures. So I was sort of working on at the grassroots level, not on women in science, but the bigger problem that we have seen typically from a university perspective, residential university. So the JNU model became a standard for other educational institutions of the country to follow. Rohini and I had talked about it later, much later, after I got involved in many inquiries and appeals in complicated cases of sexual harassment. And later on, again, I became the chairperson of committees to review the rules and procedures of GS-CASH in 2002, 2006, and so on and so forth. So there are controversies that my committees needed to straighten out to the satisfaction of or acceptance by all sections of the JNU community. In 2007, I was also preparing to go for a sabbatical. It was crazy times. And I thought that, I need not write for this book. I have never written about myself. And she kept on saying that I would extend the deadline for you, but I knew I would have no time that summer. And in some way, I trusted her so completely to do justice to the issues against inclusion that she is taking up, that I felt deep down, I did not need to get into everything. I trusted her so completely. I trusted her so deeply. I don't think I can say this for all my physics colleagues. So this was something that was kind of inbuilt in us. We didn't see each other regularly. I was based in Delhi. She was in Bangalore mostly. Whenever she came, she had multiple appointments, but we talked. So her commitment and the rigor of a physicist and whatever she did is what I admired till the last day. There are other things that she wanted to do. And now that I have retired and I have maybe a little more time to do some of the things that we wanted to do together. But that did not happen. But as I wrote to Vandana, that this was truly a life to be celebrated. I've been saying this to myself. There's a lot of aspects of Rohini that I did not know. Today, I'm learning some last few days. Also, I learned some. It's truly a life to be celebrated. And that's the spirit I want to end this discussion with. not mourning the way I've been mourning for the last 2 days maybe, but making a resolve to carry forward what all she dreamt of, and really celebrating what all she has given to each one of us personally and collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Shrubhavati? Shrubhavati?
Yes, Vandana. So, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I will be brief. I just wanted to share about the gender in physics group and the gender in physics group in high energy physics. So I will start with the beginning. I knew Rohini, I met Rohini as a PhD student. Of course, she was a role model and an inspiration. And but she was much senior. She was, in fact, a friend of my supervisors. And initially, our relationship was formal, and I thought that, but she was very friendly and approachable. But somehow our relationship, like over the years, our interactions became much closer because of our shared interest in women in physics. And I remember that in 2004 in IIT Mumbai, in the workshop on high energy physics phenomena, gender was held. And then that this will be a regular event in all the high energy meetings. I also remember that in 2006 in Bhubaneswar, WEB, in the same workshop, it happens every 2 years. Another meeting was also held like this, a session on gender. However, after that, I don't have much recollection that whether we continued having these gender sessions or not. In 2015, the Astrophysics Working Group under the ASI was formed, and in 2015 there was a web in IIT Kanpur, and I wrote to Rohini that we should form maybe a HEP gender group similar to this group. And then Rohini said, yes, that's a very good idea. In fact, she said that she initiated this session in Mumbai, and she said that although it was a high energy physics workshop, there were more people, more women beyond, not from high energy physics. There were only very few women, and people were, the more women were from other fields. Lot of other people from the other departments of IIT Mumbai came, that I remember. So Rohini said that it's a very good idea. We had a lot of discussions on this with the organizers of the IIT Kanpur workshop, like Kaushik, then Raj Gandhi, Raghavan Rangarajan, all these people were there in the discussion. But somehow neither I nor Rohini could go to this workshop in 2015, and it did not progress much. Around 2016-17, Rohini informed me that Projwal Shastri is thinking of forming a gender group in physics with the Indian Physics Association. And Rohini asked me that I should contact Projwal because of this. And then that made my connection with Projwal through Rohini. And then in 2017, the Gender in Physics Working Group was formed. I was a member. Vandana was a member. Tanushri was a member. Suchetana was a member. And then Projwal was the chair. Rohini was in the advisory panel. There are a lot of other people in the advisory panel here. Sumati, then Nilima, all these people are also here. So then it was formed. After that, we didn't. So then in 2020, Vandana suggested that in the DAE HEP symposium, we should have a gender session on high energy physics. So Bedang agreed very readily in very short notice. And at that time, we discussed with Rohini, and Rohini gave a talk, and in her talk, the formation of the high energy physics gender group was initiated. In fact, in 2015, when I had this discussion with Rohini, Rohini told me that we should have gender groups in condensed matter physics, in optics, in all the sub areas of physics, and then we should form a national working group in physics. So however, the gender in physics group was formed first, and now we have the high energy physics group was constituted in 2020. And then now we have the gender groups in nuclear and accelerator physics, in condensed matter physics. The gravitation and general relativity also had formed their own gender group. So these discussions have percolated to, in many sub areas. And I feel that there are more discussions on this topic. In fact, Rohini told me that, we should coordinate with other groups like, gender groups in biology, in chemistry, and we should have a national gender group. And I think that although we have the academic panels, but this idea can also be pursued. Rohini always had many ideas. She was also involved with the Indian Physics Association. She will always attend the GPMs since the time I am attending, and she will always come out with new ideas. And even when she was unwell, she would be sending us some new ideas which the gender group can pursue. I can't imagine that, Rohini is not there. I think her presence is very much there, and her presence will very much be there for generations to come. We will miss you, Rohini. Thank you.
Shrirup?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think I will speak for all of us that it was hard to listen to the recording from Rohini and think that it's a recording and it was not Rohini speaking live. And I think because I think she will be live in our memories for all time. Anyway, people have spoken about Rohini's contributions to women in science, and Nilima has briefly touched upon her science. But since I'm a particle physicist and I have collaborated with Rohini, I've been interacting with her for 35 years. I will summarize her science in a little bit. So Rohini's active period covers 48 years, from 1976 when she wrote her first paper, and August of this year when her last paper was published. She has more than 350 papers in the Spires, which at an astounding average of 7 papers per year. So she was really very prolific. Not only that, she had more than 16,000 citations and then an average of 60 per paper. So it's astounding how one can produce quantity and quality at this level. Very interestingly, the most prolific period during which she wrote her most papers and the most number of papers and so on is the period from 2007 to 2019, which covers the age from 55 to 67, which I think very few people normally achieve. So that was Rohini. Her main work was she worked both on electroweak interactions, on strong interactions, and on physics beyond the standard model. And as many people know, or Nilima mentioned, she was the pioneer in India of collider physics together with the late Mr. D.P. Roy. They were the people who not only started collider physics, but they taught it to a whole generation of younger physicists, which involves me and others. Her research topics, I think first she started working mostly on hadronic structure functions. I mean, it was a new thing at the time she started her PhD. As Nilima has mentioned, she did a lot of work on photon structure functions, some with Manuel Dries and some with Giulia Pancheri, who is in this meeting and who has been her lifelong collaborator. Perhaps she will say more about it. Then with D.P. Roy, they did a very famous work on the isolated lepton signal for the top quark, which was later used to actually discover the top quark. So that was a very significant piece of work. She worked extensively on supersymmetry searches, in particular with the very first paper on R parity violation, which has been a very Indian thing, a very popular Indian topic, which we have all worked on, was the first paper. She was a co-author of that with Probi Roy and Zaxis data. And one other interest, I mean, she worked on almost everything in high energy physics, but one other lasting interest on her was the CP properties of Higgs and of the gauge boson. She wrote many papers of that, in which I also collaborated with her. And that was a lasting interest. Now, apart from that, Rohini was very active, not only in attending conferences, but also in organizing conferences and trying to bring the Indian community and the international community into contact. In particular, she spent a lot of effort on the effort to have a linear collider, the International Linear Collider, it is called Japan Linear Collider at one time. And in fact, she was one of the founders of what was the Indian Linear Collider Working Group. She was also a very strong supporter of the INO, which Satya or absolutely has talked about. From the beginning, she was a very active member of the workshops in particle phenomenology, the WEP series. She attended almost all of them, and in all of them, I mean, she was ubiquitous everywhere. She was also responsible for bringing the Lepton Photon Conference to India. And moreover, she was one of the Indian face on the Asia Europe Pacific Schools in High Energy Physics, which are jointly organized by CERN and KEK, and where she was in the International Organizing Committee, and she was also responsible very much for bringing that school to the first school in 2014, to bring the third school to India. It was held in Toshali Sands, and Rohini was there, of course, throughout. Even as late as 2022, it was about a couple of years ago, she organized a conference on quantum devices in high energy physics, which was between ISC and ICTS jointly. And I had the privilege of working with her on that. And her enthusiasm was unbounded for that. As late as last year, she wrote an obituary for the late Stephen Weinberg with Urjit Yagnik. It is difficult to believe that time to write her obituary has already come. So I will not go very long. I will just end with one personal reminiscence, just to tell you about her enthusiasm for physics. Long back when I was a graduate student, Rohini and I were collaborating on a project, and I happened to visit IISc to visit the CHEP, which was then the CTS, Center for Theoretical Studies. And as many people who know me know that I'm a night person. So I had said that I will do this work at night. So there was some heavy amount of computer coding to do. So I arrived there after dinner, and whom should I find there but Rohini? And Rohini, of course, is not a night person, was not a night person. So I asked her that, why do I see you here? And she said, okay, I came here to give you some enthusiasm and company. So she was there. And then, I kept working, and she was doing her own work. Then after some time, she came and said, I'm feeling very sleepy. So there happened to be a bed somewhere in that CTH. So she went off and got a couple of hours of sleep. And then at 3 o'clock, Rohini comes rubbing her eyes and asks that, how is it? I said, it's done. I want to see the results. So she actually wanted to see the results. And she had stayed up and, stayed there for all of that time. Well, after that, the results were nice. We were happy with that. So we shut up shop and we had to come. So we had to walk right across the IISc campus because I was staying on the other side, close to the gymkhana. And Rohini was also staying in that area. So we walked right across the IISc campus, and then we came and discovered that all the gates were closed. So there was no option except to climb the wall. And the IISc wall on that side, it's slightly high. It's very low on the side of the road because the road is at a higher level. And the wall itself is not very high, so I could climb. But Rohini was a very small person. So at that time at night, both of us looked around for bricks and stones, and we built a little bit of a stairway. And then finally, Rohini climbed that stairway and jumped the wall. And only then we went home. I want to mention this as an anecdote, which I will always remember very fondly, to show her absolute enthusiasm for everything which she did. So she will be sorely missed. And I can't say much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanushri?
Thank you, Vandana, for giving me the chance. I will be brief because I know many people are waiting. There are so many friends, so many followers. So I really will not take much time. As you know, my field of research and Rohini's field of research are very different. Rohini used to visit Esenbo Center, and I had kind of, acquaintance with her in terms of saying hi and hello, because she always had a special corner for any women physicists she will see around. But our friendship really grew when we met each other in Paris, because there was a conference in Women in Science in Paris, which was organized by CEFIPRA. So I was in the council of CEFIPRA, and Rohini was my predecessor in the council. So I took basically Rohini's position. Rohini was supposed to organize that Women in Science conference in Paris. So since Rohini stepped down and I took over, so I had to organize that conference. And we definitely invited Rohini. And that is the time I got to know her in much more detail. I think there were some reminiscences about her personal life. Personal life is important, and she would really tell me a lot of things about her personal life, which I didn't know, and I didn't know that how much she suffered from that pain. And I think it was mentioned, it is the pain which makes one stronger and stronger. And that point I really realized that, because I also lived separated from my husband for many years, and we would find some common bonding, and she was really like a mother or an elder sister. So I could share almost all my feelings with her. And I can tell that there are very few with whom I can share such feeling. She had such a sense of warmth and comfort, she can create, that you can really, really open up. And since then, our friendship grew, and we would talk to each other in every possible occasion, wherever a need would arise. And the very last one, which actually Vandana showed the recording. So when I approached her to be a panelist and also to take part in inauguration, she was very enthusiastic, and all arrangements were made. Then one day I got a phone call from her. She was very apologetic. She said, very, very apologetic, such a senior level person, being so much apologetic, so much of humbleness. And she said, Tanushree, I'm actually not very well. I don't think I should travel. And I immediately said, no, no, you don't need to travel. You just be present online. And those of you who have heard her, you just played that her speech in the inauguration meeting. It was full and full of life. No one would imagine actually she was passing through such a kind of illness. Even 2 weeks back, we had some email exchange. She was trying to, kind of insist me to raise some issue in the IPA council meeting. And I had little idea she had the surgery that time and she was in ICU. She was writing those messages from the ICU. So if we have not learned anything from Rohini, we should at least learn how much you can strive and how much you can struggle and how much of energy you can give to, for every little thing, every little one. She will be, she will like to have it as perfect as possible. In fact, the issue she wanted to raise, I don't think that will benefit her at all. That will benefit the entire community. Even from the ICU, if someone can think about the entire community, we will actually miss such a person, such a leader. And I think all of us will miss her. And I would just like to say, Rohini, wherever you are, you keep on encouraging the way you used to have done to us so far. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Mati?
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to say that I actually did not know. I've also known Rohini a very long time, but not as long as because she had left Stony Brook when I joined. I met her as a postdoc when I was a postdoc in Madison, and she had come over to visit. And our friendship has been since that time, basically because we also moved in the same circles with Nilima, Sunil, and so on. So we've had a lot of overlap over many years. One of the common things between us being we are both vegetarians. So often when we go out for dinner and all, we were the only two vegetarians around and so on. I remember, I just wanted to mention 2 points. One is that as Nilima and Srirup have already said, she's done a lot of very important work in physics. And it's probably necessary to mention that even for the younger people who want to work for these things like Working Group of Women in Physics and so on, it's first very important to establish yourself as a important physicist. It's only then that you can make a kind of mark in changing things for even other women. I remember her collaboration with Manuel Rees, because we were in a conference in Singapore where people would say, Manuel was very tall, as many of you would know, that you would either see one of them or hear one of them. So I think people have also mentioned about how that Rohini was extremely enthusiastic and she could be heard, and her laughter and her speech could be heard a long distance, even if you couldn't see her in many places, in conferences and so on. And the other point I would like to mention is that unlike, I mean, me and Nilima and many of the other people who were there in early years know that it was not easy to kind of influence people to take women in physics seriously. And most of us maybe tried a little and then gave up. Rohini was extremely effective. She really made a difference. And I think all the younger people who are now there, I hope that they have to realize that she had to actually work very hard and had convinced many people at high levels to get many things started. Now that it's started, hopefully it will go on. And I hope that the younger people also have the enthusiasm and so on to continue it in the same way that she started. Okay, thanks. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Shobna?
I've been very sad the last few days ever since I heard of Rohini's passing away. In fact, I even cried a little bit. I've known Rohini for a little over 40 years now. When she was a postdoc in GIPWG-IPA, I was a kid growing up on that campus. My brother Mohan and I have been talking about her for the last few days. And Mohan told me something which I didn't know, which is that she was a cricket fan and that he and she used to sometimes watch cricket together in the TV room in the hostel and then talk about how the matches were progressing, etc. I got to know her better when I moved to Bangalore, and she and I lived on the same Vigyanpura campus, and she would often have me over to her apartment for dinner. We also shared the same maid, Rani, and the maid, Rani, was very fond of her, and even after Rohini moved off the campus, Rani would often ask me to phone Rohini Amma so that Rani could talk to her, which wasn't very easy because they don't have a single language in common, but they still managed to communicate somehow. And I would see Rohini cycling the 3 kilometers from the Vigyanpura campus to the main IISc campus, wearing a cycle helmet. I want to emphasize something that people have said, but I think really needs to be underlined, that she was an excellent physicist, and she was not an excellent physicist for a woman. She was an excellent physicist, period. And to make her mark as a physicist, this is again something people have mentioned, she really had to struggle and fight against a lot of misogyny, especially in her early years when she returned to India after her time in the US as a student. This is something she didn't talk too much about in public, but one-on-one, she has told me about the really not just discouraging, but downright nasty things people said to her, sort of implying that she shouldn't even continue in physics. And this is something that women in physics face a lot. And this is part of why a lot of women drop out. And I think it's a credit to Rohini's love for science, her determination, her strength of character, that she did not get discouraged. And even though the situation was so difficult and not everybody was encouraging, she fought on and succeeded brilliantly and was an inspiration and role model to many women in science in India. I think the part of the reason that we have things like a gender and physics working group for women in physics, that the issue of women in science is at all discussed even in the Indian science community. I mean, it is still very much a issue that poses lots of problems. There's a lot of work that remains to be done, but the fact that it is at all even mentioned, I think Rohini had a big role to play in that. And this was, as many people have said, an issue close to her heart. Many times she would call me to discuss something, like if we were both on a selection committee for jobs or an award or something, she would make sure that the women who were applicants were not sidelined or ignored. She would make sure that they were given full consideration, that people did not dismiss their cases out of, say, implicit bias. Rohini's courage, good humor, energy, brilliance, passion for physics, and her fight for gender equity, I think, are lasting legacies that she leaves behind. And I hope that all of us will discuss what we can do to have some kind of lasting memorial for her. Maybe we could start a lecture series or a fellowship or something we can discuss, which combines both her love for physics and her fight for gender equity in some way. I think it would be nice if we could do something to make sure that we celebrate her achievements in these fields in some lasting way. Thank you.
Thank you. Debashish?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the chance. It's very difficult to come to terms with Rohini's passing. I've known her since the time I joined TFR as a graduate student in 1988. So many, many memories. She has been like a very good friend of the family, extended family, in fact. And I just don't want to, we don't have time to go into all these details. A lot of things have been already mentioned, but one thing has so far not been mentioned that I'd like to point out. This came up. Her passion for teaching was mentioned in the memorial meeting organized by the IISc. In that context, I want to mention that she was very actively involved with the SERC School in Theoretical High Energy Physics, something that she even was involved with probably from the beginning as a initiator. And I had the great fortune to work with her for many years with that. So those of you who have been to these schools or have known her, known this aspect of her life, will know that how passionately she was involved with this activity. And just one more memory that I want to share, kind of an anecdote before I close, is this work that Nilima and later Srirup elaborated on, and Sumati also mentioned, her work on the photon structure function with Manuel Reyes. Manuel used to visit TIFR at that time, and that's when they worked. And this picture will forever remain etched in my memory. As Sumati mentioned, Manuel is very tall and lanky, or at least used to be lanky. I have not seen him in ages now. And well, he is way taller than even probably the average German. And we all know how tiny Rohini is. So these two were very actively engrossed in their discussion, and they would furiously pace up and down the TFR colonnade, discussing their physics. Manuel slightly bent so that they can probably hear each other over the strong wind that was blowing. And this came up with, they came up with a lot of brilliant pieces of paper, which are very widely cited and were used in even planning the detectors, of which I'm not an expert, so I cannot comment on that. But you can imagine the picture of these two going around and very, very just oblivious to their surroundings and discussing very passionately. So this is something I'll always remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Prajwal? Prajwal?
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks for this. One thing I have to say is that one of the first obituaries that got published about Rohini, it was a big release that it headlined her as a particle physicist. It did not mention anything about her gender. And I think that says many, many things at many levels. I will mention her major contribution to our profession, apart from her contribution to science. Her major contribution to our profession, I think that's Leelavati's daughter. A lot of people from all walks of life applauded it, and those of us who wrote pieces in it, and especially in A Girl's Guide to a Life in Science, have had young people come and tell us even today how they have been inspired by it. And this itself is testimony to the impact that it has had. And that book and our writings, we who were mostly very reluctant writers, would not have happened because, and it only happened because Rohini's patience and her persistence, which I too personally experienced as she pushed me over my writing block and really pushed me to finish my. But it's also extremely important that Rohini got the Indian Academy of Sciences to commission. That was very important for our profession because it was a situation where she brought the formal structures to acknowledge the problem that was there, a problem that nobody wanted to talk about. And she brought that into the mainstream of our discipline. And the true value of this, I think, we will realize only in perfect. So I think I'll stop.
Thank you. Shikha?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, thanks, Vandana, for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, it all feels like a personal loss. It's difficult to see that Rohini is no more. And we always felt that we have Rohini whom we can contact and talk to whenever we have any issue or whenever we wanted to get some about anything in principle, about any problem we are facing. Our fields were very different. Of course, I'm in condensed matter, but still, she was always there to hear and tell us whatever best information or suggestion she could give. Last time I met her was in February this year, and she had come for a conference in SRM, Chennai, for a national conclave in physics. And she was already under treatment, taking medicines at that time. But and she looked physically affected, but her spirits and energy were exactly the same what we know her. She was so vigorous. Her talks were brilliant, and she was a guest of honor. She gave a science talk, and she was also involved in panel discussion. And her vigor was her characteristic property, and it always enthusiased whoever was listening to her. And she had amazing leadership qualities. And I came to know her much later, when after I joined IOP. And especially I came in during writing for Leelavati's daughters. But her support, suggestion, guidance, I will always cherish what she has provided. And I really, whatever I have known her since then, since the writing of Leelavati's daughter, even sometime before that. But her enthusiasm and leadership qualities and vigor and her laughter will always remain in our memories. And especially her enthusiasm for science and her deep care for equity and all the work she has done for women in science is truly remarkable. And I think we'll always remember her for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shikha. I don't see any more hands. Rohini's sister, Dr. Kalpana, is with us. I'll now request her to share some thoughts.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello,
Firstly,
everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Kalpana, for joining. Please.
Actually, I think I'm the only person outside physics who is attending this meet, and that is thanks to Rohini. After going through all the proceedings of this meeting, I feel so fortunate that the Almighty has given us a chance to be a sister of such a great height. I'm very sorry that I may not be able to talk what I want to speak, but I just want to mention that we have actually, I'm just 1 year younger to her. So we have grown up like twins. And in my school days, she was my role model. Even in elocution competitions, in our studies, we used to be together. And after she chose physics as her line, we have seen the tough fight that she had to give from close quarters. You will be interested in knowing, like one of you mentioned about that climbing over the wall. Similarly, when she went to IIT Bombay for the first time, in her first travel to Bombay, it was met with tremendous floods, and because of that, the train could not reach the destination. She had to get down and she had to walk kilometers before she reached her destination, and she reached Santa Cruz, which was my uncle's place. She, throughout her life, had to fight a lot to achieve anything, but she had a really fiery spirit which continued till the last day of her life, because she was fighting a terrible illness. And in spite of knowing all the odds, she was so full of life and full of hope that you will be interested in knowing that even she was with me for last 3 months. She had a tremendous faith in me, and I'm very sorry that our medical science could not save her in spite of all the efforts. But she was so full of life that she had planned that I bought one new car, MG Comet, and she told me, Kalpana, once I get better, I also will buy one more Comet, and we will hire a driver, and I'll take that car to ISER, because she was planning to join ISER. You would be interested in knowing that when I was listening to all the talks, especially about the talk at IIT Madras, because last 2 years she was not really well, and I was her main medical what I can say advisor, and she used to ask me whether should I go for this, and I used to say ki now you have to cut down on these things, Rohini, please. And then she would say nahi nahi, but then there is a talk, that talk she had mentioned to me at IIT Madras, that I have to chat with the students, and I think that it is terribly important that I go there and I speak. So even though she was not feeling well, she went all the way to give the talk, and she was really dedicated. But I want to tell you some other part which nobody has discussed so far. She was a great family person. I mean, in her last illness, when she was very serious at Bangalore, when I flew there, the doctor who was treating there, he asked me, Madam, you must have become aware of what all complications she has. So please call her family members. So I told her that we are her family, because she was so close to all her sisters. You know about her broken marriage, but it was okay because she had such a great family support from all of us, and she was such a dear Rohini Aji. I have two grandsons, and my younger grandson, he is an autistic child because he was born grossly prematurely, but he was such a great friend of hers that 2 years ago, when he used to make letters with the play. He used to make letters Rohini Aji, and then he wanted her to see that on the phone. And he was in great love with her. And not only this, she was close to all the women, not only the women in science. Somebody has talked about one cook Rani Similarly, she had one cook, Ratna, at Bangalore, and she has made her life. She was so philanthropic that she has given huge donations to the family so that she can establish herself in life. She can teach her son, and now her son is in a very good position in one company. And she was always she has had helped so many institutes where she used to give helping hand. And really, I feel myself so fortunate that I God has given me this opportunity to be so close to her. And you can just imagine, you people have met her long back. Last 3 months, I have been with her continuously. So I can't spend even one moment without thinking of her. Very sorry that I can't continue further. Sorry, but thank you very much for showing such love and affection to my departed sister. Thank you.
Thank you. We understand the pain, and really, may God give you the strength to deal with it. Inakshi, and then we'll close.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just raised my hand quite late. I was quite moved listening to her sister. I joined TIFR in 80, and Rohini was already there for PhD, and Rohini was already there for a year as postdoc. And she was so confident, hardworking, and we used to all admire her. And within 2 years, I felt she was reduced to tears by the theory group at that time. Her mother also used to come and visit her at that time, and I had spent quite some time with Rohini's mother. And of course, she fought all that. She joined Bombay University outshone, I think, all the senior faculty in the theory group at that time. You can't hold a grudge against an institute. It's the people who make, and they're all gone now. So it was also funny that TIFR hired her first PhD student and did not think it fit to hire her. And I remember her mom telling a story. She was also very sad that Rohini was suffering so much. And she said Rohini, right from her childhood, has been very helpful and good to others. Why should she suffer to so much? Apparently in her school once, either a fire or flood happened, and all the children were sent back home, and Rohini hadn't come. So her mother got worried and went to the school, and she found that she was in the school helping everyone to get out, and she was the last one to leave. And so I'm glad that she fought all that, and she really came out very successful. I think she achieved everything that she deserved and wanted to. And yes, I will miss her a lot. Thank you.
We now come to the end of the program. There's a Marathi poem which says, देणाऱ्याने देत जावे, घेणाऱ्याने घेत जावे, घेता घेता एक दिवस देणाऱ्याचे हात घ्यावे. A donor should continue to give, a recipient should continue to receive, and eventually a recipient should imbibe in oneself the culture of donation. We all can hope to imbibe Rohini's passion and inspiration for the science and the gender equity goal, and hope to achieve the goal, work towards the goal of the equity, following our paths, our own paths. And as all was hoped by them, this gender group can be then dissolved, because there'll be a day when the need for it will cease to exist. Rest in peace, Rohini. You will always stay with us in our thoughts. Thank you all.